Good day everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to configure Platform SSO for macOS. Platform SSO or single sign-on is a feature that allows you to join your macOS devices to Entra ID, because that was not possible until Platform SSO has been introduced. Because the only way how you can integrate macOS with Microsoft Entra ID was via device registration, which is something different, via the Microsoft Enterprise SSO plugin. Now, with Platform SSO, you can actually join your devices to Microsoft Entra ID, which allows you to use Secure Enclave, for example, for phishing-resistant authentication, or allows you to also enable other users to sign in to your macOS devices with their Microsoft Entra ID credentials. Platform SSO is at the moment in public preview. It's been introduced at the beginning of May of this calendar year. Still in public preview. There are some prerequisites. The most important prerequisite is that you need to have the latest version of the company portal application installed on your macOS devices. It needs to be at least 5.2404 version or newer. If you have this installed on your macOS devices, you can onboard your devices to Platform SSO and leverage the benefits of Platform SSO. The Platform SSO is very similar to Windows Hello for Business. So if you are familiar with Windows Hello for Business, primary refresh tokens, single sign-on to cloud services, and biometric authentication, Platform SSO is something that's very similar working on macOS devices. So on the background, it may use Secure Enclave, which is a hardware chip or device that's on your Mac devices. Secure Enclave is very similar to TPM on on devices from other vendors, and the Secure Enclaves then host the private key for authentication, and this private key is then used for authentication, including phishing-resistant authentication. So that's actually one of the biggest security benefits of it, is that when you use Secure Enclave for authentication with Platform SSO, you actually can leverage phishing-resistant authentication, which means that you can actually enforce it via conditional access policies. There is a different configuration on older macOS versions and newer macOS versions, so I will primarily focus on the configuration that's for macOS 14 or newer. If you have devices with macOS 13 or older, you need to do some additional configuration. When you configure Platform SSO for macOS, you get all the benefits of single sign-on, primary refresh tokens, and the primary refresh tokens also contain the claim on how the authentication happened. So if it was a password, or if it was biometric authentication using Secure Enclave, and this information is then sent to Microsoft Entra ID and can be leveraged in conditional access policies. But the important fact is that your existing local admin account on your macOS device is still present on your macOS device. Technically, you will use your local macOS account when you are signing in for the first time after a reboot. So when you restart your Mac, you still will have to type in your local admin password for the account that you have used until now. The reason for that is that Apple File Vault, which is the way how Apple encrypts disks, leverages the local user's password to unlock the encryption key for the disk. That's the reason why the local admin account needs to be preserved, because the local admin account password is used to unlock the disk. But if you onboard more users, then they will have their own Microsoft Entra ID accounts. And even on top of your local admin account, it will use Microsoft Entra ID credentials and primary refresh token to seamlessly to allow you to seamless single sign-on to other applications or cloud services. So if you want to configure Platform SSO, you can do that from the Intune Admin Center, intune.microsoft.com. If you go to Devices, macOS, Configuration Profiles, we can create a new configuration profile here. The profile type will be Settings Catalog. The name can be anything, so it can be, for instance, Platform SSO for Mac OS. And in the settings, we need to add authentication, extensible single sign-on. And now it depends if you are creating a policy that will apply to macOS 13 or older, or if you are creating a policy or profile that will be applied to macOS 14 or newer. Because if you are creating a profile that will be applied to older macOS versions, you need to enable and configure this authentication method with the deprecated information. If you are targeting only macOS 14 or newer, you don't have to configure this. So for the things that we need to configure, we need to configure the extension identifier, obviously Platform SSO. Here are multiple settings that you can configure. I will focus on the things that are required for Platform SSO, not the optional settings at the moment. So I will just use the authentication method here and use shared device keys. Then we need to enable a registration token, screen lock behavior, team identifier, and URLs. That's all you need for Platform SSO. But like I said, there are other options that you can optionally configure. So for the URLs, it's documented. You simply need to put in all URLs that are used for authentication. So it's the login.microsoftonline.com, login.microsoft.com, sts.windows.net, and also the regional clouds. So first for China, and then for the US as well. Okay, so that's all for the URLs. Then the team identifier will be this one. Again, it's in the documentation. Screen lock behavior is do not handle, and registration token is device registration, because we want full device registration. We want to enroll the device to Microsoft Entra ID. Authentication method. There are three options that you can configure: password, smart card, or secure enclave key. The difference is that either of it works with Platform SSO, so it's completely up to you. Password is just simply typing in the username and password. It's not recommended because it's not secure, or not secure enough, I would say. Smart card is for situations or scenarios when you use smart cards for authentication, which is not very usual any longer. So the recommended option would be use secure enclave key. It's not recommended only by me, but it's also recommended by Microsoft actually. So I will choose this option. This option uses the secure enclave that I've already talked about. We have the key authentication on the background that allows you also to enforce phishing-resistant authentication in conditional access policies, for example. Because when using secure enclave, it's considered as phishing-resistant authentication. Use shared device keys needs to be turned on. Extension identifier is defined in the documentation, and type is redirect, because we want to redirect the authentication to Microsoft Entra ID. That's all for the mandatory settings that you should configure. For the optional settings that you have available, let me scroll back up. authentication. You can, for instance, configure account display name. Account display name is typically the name of the organization. It's shown during the enrollment process. So when you start enrolling your device through the company portal application to Platform SSO, which on the background does Microsoft Entra join, you will see this account display name on the screen on Microsoft company portal application. You can also configure additional groups, additional administrators. This can leverage also the Entra ID groups that can be then synchronized to on-prem groups on the device locally. So for instance, because by default, your local admin account will be preserved as your local admin account. So you won't use your, you will not lose your admin permissions on the device locally. The Entra ID integration will be configured on top of it. Because like I said, there are the consequences with disk encryption. But other users that can potentially use the Mac as well and will sign in with their Entra ID credentials will not be administrators by default on the macOS device. But you may need to make them administrators, or you want to have your system administrators to be administrators on all macOS devices as well. That's the reason for having these groups potentially synchronized, so you can pretty much configure mapping between Entra ID groups and local groups. Enable create user account and login. That creates local credentials for the users that log in with their Microsoft Entra ID account. New user authorization mode, this is an interesting option because it allows you to configure one-time permissions for a new user at initial login. So during the initial login process, the user will have some one-time permissions configured. For instance, that the user will be local administrator on the device for whatever reason, but then the user will be a regular user, for example. So only during the first on the initial authentication, the user will have different permissions that will be then dropped. Or user authorization mode is very similar to the new user authorization mode. It's just the difference is that user authorization mode sets permanent permissions. So if you want to keep the user or give the user permanent permissions, you would use this authorization mode. Or you can use the group mappings as I described earlier. So these are some of the optional settings that you can configure, but it's not necessary. So the only necessary things are these that I have configured here. So then we can simply go next, assign this profile to the scope that you wish. So you can go with all devices or just specific groups. It's completely up to you. And then when this profile gets applied to end user devices, the user will be prompted to finish the enrollment process, because on the background it joins the device to Microsoft Entra ID and the primary refresh token needs to be obtained. There is one important remark, and that is, if you have already used Microsoft Enterprise SSO plugin, you first need to disable the Microsoft Enterprise SSO plugin before you can deploy Platform SSO. The reason is that there is a conflict, because you pretty much configure the same thing from multiple configuration profiles. So it will error out in Intune and it will not be applied to end user devices, so the users will not see anything. So first disable Microsoft Enterprise SSO plugin if you have used it, and then enable Platform SSO. Otherwise, you will end up with error message 10002 saying that multiple SSO payloads are configured, and the profile will not be applied to the devices. So when you apply the profile to devices, users will be prompted to do enrollment of their device to Microsoft Entra ID. It's a very simple process. Users will just sign in with their Entra ID credentials, will configure the enrollment with their local admin credentials, optionally configure also Touch ID, authentication, and that's pretty much it. Then the state of the device in Microsoft Entra ID changes from Microsoft Entra registered to Microsoft Entra joined. That's one way how you can check that it really works, because there is no other way how you can join macOS devices to Entra ID. It's only possible via Platform SSO. If you want to check the status locally on the device, you can go to the macOS settings, privacy and security, and profiles. And then if you scroll down, you should see Platform SSO profile configured under com.apple.extensible SSO profile. It will be probably the last profile, because it's probably the last profile that was configured on the device. And there you should see the settings that are also configured here in Intune, such as that the type is redirect, that the extension identifier is the UBF something, and so on. So that's the way how you can configure it. That's the way how you can verify it really worked. I definitely recommend configuring Platform SSO for your macOS devices, because it not only simplifies the user experience or make it more user-friendly, because they use one identity for everything, but it also improves the security, because since you enable Platform SSO on your devices, you can start enforcing phishing-resistant authentication also for macOS users, which is a huge security improvement. That's all from my side for today's video. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment, and I look forward to showing you some other interesting settings on one of my upcoming videos.